In this video, we're going to look at performing calculations with named ranges. And to help us, we're also going to introduce two great functions called COUNTIFS and SUMIFS. Zara's first calculation is she needs to update the late charge. It turns out, as well as the penalty rate, there's a $2 a day flat rate for overdue invoices. She's also been asked not to put the flat rate anywhere in the worksheet. The problem is we still want to keep that single point of entry. Well, we can use a named range to solve this. So we're going to come back to our Name Manager on our Formulas tab, and we're going to click the New button to add a new range. And we're going to call it flat_rate. We do not, however, wish it to refer to a particular cell in the sheet. So I'm going to remove all of this, and instead I'm going to just put the number 2. This is called a constant because unlike a cell which can vary, this is always going to be 2. And then we say OK. You'll see our flat rate has been added, and we can say close. Let's go and change our calculation now. So I'm going to double click into N5, and then after penalty rate, I'm going to type plus, and then take my overdue by and multiply by my flat rate. But I can't click on it. Here's what makes named ranges really great. If I type FL for flat rate, it actually comes up in my autocomplete, and I can just press Tab to finish that off and press Enter. My flat rate has been added, and I can double click to copy that down. So that was a slightly unusual use of named ranges, but it can be very useful for conversion rates or values you just don't want people to see, but you want to include them in your calculations. Let's look at a more typical use of named ranges in calculations. We're going to now come to our recon analysis sheet, and this is where Zara actually needs to start comparing the values in the two sheets. And the first thing she needs is a bottom line. What does the supplier say we paid? What does our system say we paid? So we're going to need to add up the amounts in each sheet. But we haven't actually put a named range in the supplier statement. So the first one we're going to do, you'll see how it looks without a named range. So clicking in B3, we're going to type equals and sum. Then tab to just open your bracket. But now I have to go and select the data from a different sheet. So I'm going to click onto the supplier invoice statement. I'm going to come to the top of my amount column, click on Q2, and you could drag down, but it's much quicker to press Ctrl-Shift down arrow. And then really important, do not click back into your recon analysis, press Enter. That has worked, but it's quite a simple calculation, and it was fairly fiddly to create, and you can see the resulting formula is quite long and quite ugly. Let's see a very similar calculation, but this time using a named range. So in B4, we're going to type equals sum and tab to open our brackets. But now we don't have to click into that sheet. We can just type the named range. So AM, down arrow twice, and tab. Didn't even have to use my mouse. Lovely formula as a result. Press Enter. Job done. Now, as our calculations get more complex, and the more we're pulling data from different sheets, and particularly when we then start adding dollars on as well, our named ranges make our calculations much more elegant and much quicker. Let's look at another example. So the next thing I want to do, and I'll just click back into my invoice report for a moment, is we want to find out how many invoices were generated from Sydney and how many from Melbourne. So really what I want to do is count how many times the word Sydney appears in my location column. And the function that will help me with this is my COUNTIFS. So coming back to my recon analysis, make sure B8 is selected, and we're going to type equals COU. And there are quite a lot of count functions. You'll notice there's a COUNTIF singular and a COUNTIFS plural. COUNTIF singular only allows for a single criteria, whereas COUNTIFS plural is the newer one, 127 criteria. So let's use that one. I'm going to double click. The first thing the COUNTIFS wants to know is which column am I checking? And in this case, it's the location. So I'm going to just type LOC because I've named it, and tab. Then a comma, and it says, fine, I'm going to look in the location column. What am I looking for? We're looking for the word Sydney. And then press enter. And when I copy that down, there's my total invoices for Melbourne. Similar to the COUNTIFS, there's also a function called SUMIFS. And that's what we're going to need for our next example, where we actually want to add up the amounts for Sydney and Melbourne. So it's similar, but when it finds the word Sydney, it's actually going to add up the corresponding amount in the amount column. Back in our recon analysis, we're going to click into C8 and we're going to type equals SUM and choose SUMIFS and tab. Now the SUMIFS requires an additional argument because it needs to know the column you're going to add. And this is our amount paid. So I'm just going to AM, down arrow twice, and tab. Then type a comma. Now it's very similar to the COUNTIFS. I need my criteria range, which is my location, and I need my criteria, which is Sydney. Press enter, double click to copy down. So what we've seen there is that by using named ranges in our calculations, we actually make them easier to create and the resulting function itself much easier to understand. We also introduced two functions for aggregating data, the COUNTIFS and the SUMIFS.